anything.
No.
So yeah, Seal Deck, there's going to be a lot of stuff going on. We'll try to make sure that we give you guys a heads up on everything that's happening. Braun Duin is playing a Nihilist. We can go over some of the more important stuff as the match progresses, but they're getting started here. Both players leading off with a Guild Gate to start off with mana fixing. This format very reliant on mana fixing to help cast your spells. Most of the time you're going to end up playing at least 3 colors, sometimes 4 and even 5.
Yeah, in this player's case, Daniel Meyer's case, he's playing all 5 colors.
Okay, and this is actually a very great start from BBD. Call the Conclave, a 3/3 on turn 2 is pretty solid in this format. It matches up well against almost all the other 2 and 3 drops, beating them in combat, and really starts trading later on for 4 and 5 drops, which is awesome. And along with his few populate cards he has in the main deck, it's going to be pretty solid. This Ember Beast needs another creature alongside it to block. Looks like BBD has a couple mountains and an annihilating fire in hand, so he should be able to take care of another blocker, maybe deploying another threat here along the way.
Yep, and really he's content to just crash in for 3, knowing that Ember Beast probably won't be getting in for at least 2 more turns.
Right, and it looks like Daniel Meyer has an Orzhov Guild Gate. Is he actually splashing any white cards, or is he just using it for the gate abilities?
At first I thought this was a 5-color deck, but looking at his deck list a little more, I just think he messed up the deck list a little bit. I think he's only 3. He is green, black, red.
All right. Well, the Guild Gates actually have a lot of utility with various other cards. There is the play of the new Gate Guardians from Gate Crash, where if you have 2 gates in play, they do something really sweet. There's also a few other ones like Armory Guard from Return to Ravnica, as well as Ogre Jailkeeper, Jailbreaker from Return to Ravnica. So they do have some utility to go with them. Looks like Daniel doesn't have a follow-up play for his 3-drop Ember Beast. Maybe he's got a removal spell or something for this creature. Oh no, this is really bad for Brian. Flashed in 5/5 Trampling Worm off of Advent of the Worm is bad news bears. Not only does this allow his Ember Beast to both attack and block next turn, but it can allow it to block this turn. I might have double blocked to play around any sort of Blood Rush shenanigans, because here now Brian, all he has to have is a +3/+3 effect or bigger, to deal with that worm token. But if he had double blocked with the Ember Beast, it would have taken 2 pump spells to really get through. But unfortunately for Brian, he doesn't really seem to have much of anything.
Right, that's a pretty lucky break for Daniel. His powerful mythic rare gets to...
Oh, it's just a regular rare.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It seems like it's mythic rare. It's very good.
Does.
We talked about it a lot yesterday at Constructed, so...
Oh, okay. So he does have a Street Spasm to finish off the 5/5,
yeah.
So he does 2 for 1 himself, but that's pretty much what's going to happen whenever Advent of the Worm gets played.
Yeah, Brian didn't have another land, doesn't have a second red to do a whole lot with. He does, actually no, he has a force in hand. I thought he was on the play. Did he just miss a line drop this turn? Or was I just mistaken about who was on the play?
I am not sure.
Actually, I think Brian was on the draw. Forgive me. So, this Ember Beast can't really attack or block anymore. I don't think he's got another giant flash effect. So it looks like he's a little creature light on Daniel's side. Both players not really seeming to have a good way to threaten the other one just yet. Ivy Lane Denizen from Brian started up a pretty good clock, as long as he has a stream of green creatures over the next few turns, making them super awkward to both attack and block.
Right, and I'm looking over Dan's deck list a little further. He has a lot of really solid cards. He's solidly Jund, and he has a lot of the All-Stars. He has Rakdos Rage Mutts, and he has Golgari Longlegs. He has a lot of very solid creatures that you really need to make a deck like this work in Sealed.
Right. Ooh, and a pair of Guild Gates from Daniel Meyer means that he gets a threaten effect on the Ivy Lane Denizen, which turns on the Ember Beast. Not a huge swing, but it's still pretty decent.
Exactly. He probably would have played those Gatekeepers even if they didn't have that ability, just as a 2/4 to attack.
Right. And the traditional comparison to the 2/4 at the from what I've heard, is Pillar-Filled Ox. I think just because it has that cool ring to it. It was a card that was released a while ago, and it was something that in its format when it was played, it was a reasonable body, with no abilities. And so the comparison to now is that, yeah, it's just a 2/4 most of the time, but when you do get to trigger it with the gates, it's usually pretty sweet. The red one I think is probably the least impactful of the set. I really like the black one and the white one, as the black one's able to kill a creature, the white one's able to generate a creature, but even the green one getting 7 life is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
The blue one, drawing a card is okay, you know, not like amazing, but still pretty decent.
Yeah, and you know, people play the Ox all the time, and you know, a 2/4 for 4, it's always been a standard, and you know, say things like Giant Spider. Oftentimes, Giant Spider doesn't really block a flyer.
Yeah.
So
the fact that it can block a flyer does push Giant Spider up there as far as like limited commons goes. But yeah, I do agree that 2/4s are very regularly played in limited. It looks like Braun here was that Bronze Beak Moa?
Yep, that's the Moa.
Bronze Beak Moa, and this guy can get out of control. You know, it doesn't have trample or anything like that, but along with things like Celestia Charm, you know, things that can make creatures at instant speed, it can be really, really tricky. But just playing a creature pre-combat allows you to attack for 5, and that thing's pretty awesome. So
yeah, and now whenever BBD plays a green creature pre-combat, he's going to greatly enhance his team and just be able to crash in.
Agreed.
But on the turns he doesn't, though, his army's pretty unimpressive.
Right. So I wonder what BBD is going to play here.
This could be something like a mutant fight. A creature with a +1/+1 counter fights another creature.
Maybe. I don't really like that card. Seems very, very specific in what it does. Cards like that are generally not that great in limited. Sure, I mean, if you have a deck that's mostly evolved creatures, then you know it's much better than in a deck that just has something like Ivy Lane Denizens or maybe like a few creatures with Unleash. It looks like Daniel drew a Dreadbore for the turn. I see a mountain in his hand as well, but Dreadbore going to be able to take care of either the Ivy Lane Denizen or the Bronze Beak Moa for just 2 mana, allowing him to attack him with both of his guys. Brian probably going to block the Ember Beast with the Ivy Lane Denizen should it survive, or just taking 5 if the opponent decides to kill his Ivy Lane Denizen instead.
Yeah, if I were Daniel Meyer, I would probably take care of that Denizen. Yeah, he definitely, it's a bigger long-term threat than the Moa.
I mean, that's fair. You know, this feels like a good racing situation for Daniel. He's more than willing to kill the thing that can block profitably, as opposed to the creature who can only attack profitably.
Right.
So getting rid of that means that Brian's going to have to put up a lot more defenses over the next few turns to really stabilize against the Ember Beast, as well as the 2/4 creature from Daniel.
Yeah, the Annihilating Fire in BBD's hand looking particularly ugly right now.
Agreed.
It can't target anything profitably.
So one of the things about these green-red decks is they're very focused on Blood Rush most of the time, and what happens in a lot of games is that when you fall behind, you have all these cards with Blood Rush that are great when you're ahead, but they're just usually mediocre creatures on the defense. Like for example, like the what's the 2/4 mana for 4 mana that has gives +2/+4 from Gatecrash.
Right. Yeah, I don't know his name, but
I need to play this format more.
I know all the pictures. I don't know many.
Yeah, that is all the pictures are all the names sort of blend together after a while, but I know what they all do, and I know
Scab Clan Charger.
That's it. That's what I thought it was called, though. All right, so yeah, so we play a Centaur Herald here, which pumps the Bronze Beak Moa for +3/+3. Brian opting not to make a 3/3 right now to pump the Moa an additional +3/+3, so that if Daniel has a blocker next turn, he's still able to punch through for basically free. He can also block a creature here, sacrifice. He can block a creature, sacrifice the Herald before damage, prevent some damage as well. And I think at this point, when he's behind in the race, preventing that damage is going to be important.
Right. A couple of important cards to note on Daniel's side. He has 2 Weapon Surge in his deck, which, if you're unfamiliar, it's a 1 red or can overload for 2. Your creatures get +1/+0 and first strike until end of turn.
It looks like Brian is actually built way more for the late game with this deck than he is with the early game, with multiple 7-drops in Tristani's Summoner, which we talked about in length yesterday, as well as Risen Sanctuary, and topping out at 8 with Udvara Hellkite.
Wow.
He has a reasonable amount of removal to go with that, a couple combat tricks with a Giant Growth, just some decent creatures, Sunspire Griffin, as well as more removal like Tristani's Judgment, to go with his 2 Centaur's Heralds that he has. Populate spells being particularly good in situations where you can exile a creature, speeding you down, and make a 3/3 Centaur.
Yeah, pretty good. And if BBD had that, he would be in great shape.
Yeah. Looks like he finally hit a 7th land. We might be able to see here one of those giant 7-drops come down. Oh, nope, it's not a land. I'm sorry. These people slow rolling me. So a 4/4 here from Brian, which pumps the Moa. He's going to leave back both of his big guys on defense, other than the Moa. The 4/4 being particularly powerful against Ember Beast, as long as Daniel doesn't have a combat trick.
Yeah, and it looks like Daniel's really flooding out here. He has 8 lands in play. He has 3 more in hand.
Wow.
So unless he has some kind of X spell to go with these, this game's going to be over pretty quickly.
Yeah, and that's something you do see in Limited sometimes is one person will get, completely mana flooded. Like, they'll draw 4 or 5 spells, but then for the rest of the game, they just draw way more lands than spells. The opponent, gets 6 or 5 lands, plays spells throughout the entirety of the game, and really just begins to overpower you. It doesn't matter all that much what spells your opponent has, as long as he has way more spells than you.
Right.
Mana flood being a big part of Magic in general. But, I mean, it's not something you can really do about it. I think in Sealed deck, a lot more often you want to get mana screwed more than mana flooded, so that you can actually cast your late game spells. There are some, Sealed deck formats where getting mana flooded is very bad. For example, Gate Crash Sealed deck was incredibly aggressive, almost all Boros all the time, and if you ever got mana flooded, it was very hard to win. But here, Brian feeling like he has an advantage now in combat, so he plays a creature pre-combat, pumping the Moa to a 5/5 and crashing him with his team with that Scab Clan Charger in hand to really mess up combat for Daniel.
Yeah, so pretty much any one unblocked, well, if the Moa goes unblocked, BBD can just straight out kill Daniel.
Right.
Daniel is in a really tough spot here. He has no great blocks.
Yeah, I would assume here that he would probably try to eat the Centaur and just chump block the Moa. And so he's not going to be dead this turn. Brian's going to save his Centaur, killing the Ember Beast in the process. And Daniel's going to go to 3 life with just lands in hand, and just going to hope to peel a Mizium Mortars, I suppose, or something like that could clear the board. Not a whole lot else. I don't think he actually has one, so
no,
it looks like he's drawn dead.
He doesn't have a Street Spasm. Not much in the way of mass removal, and if Daniel Meyer built his deck a little differently, if he just included some of the high drops, the high end of his mana curve, he could maybe draw something pretty good here, like a Summoner. But he either didn't open them or didn't include them.
Yeah. So that's one of the interesting things about Sealed as opposed to Draft. Especially now that we have all 3 sets together, the Sealed deck format is much slower than it was with just Gatecrash or just Return to Ravnica. It's harder to focus on your 2-drop slot when your opponent very easily has the ability to just curve out, start hitting his 5, 6, and 7 drops and just overpower you. The random card pool that you get is almost always going to be 3 colors, just because of the way the format is built. You're going to have a lot of lands that come into play tapped with Guild Gates. And what that's going to do is force you, to be a slower deck, and it's something you need to work around and start to try to take advantage of, as opposed to just it being a deficit to your aggressive deck. Sealed deck in general, much slower. I would highly expect most of the better players to choose to draw first instead of play first. Again, though, in Gatecrash Shield, it was completely the opposite. Every deck was incredibly fast, at least the good ones, and choosing to draw was usually a bad idea because you could very easily get run over. This format, again, much slower, and that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah, I would really like to see Daniel Meyer side in his Angelic Edict here. I think that would let him battle against BBD's deck a little easier. He has the white sources for it. He has a Selesnya Guildgate, and he also has 2 Orzhov Guildgates, so he has 3 free white sources with which to do that. He's only playing Advent of the Worm. That's his only white card right now.
Okay. One of the cool things, I think, to compare this format specifically to Gatecrash Limited, if you were playing a deck with both red and white in it, you would expect, to play Madcap Skills and Skinbred Goblin, right?
Oh yeah, every time.
Yeah, both those cards, very good, very aggressive. However, Brian knows that this format is much slower. He knows that his deck is way more mid-range than it is aggressive, and he's not playing either Madcap Skills or Skinbred Goblin. These are 2 cards that just don't really fit the theme of his deck, and you have to know that you're building a deck. You're not building a collection of quote-unquote good cards. Creature enchantments are generally not very good, in most sealed formats or even draft formats. Madcap skills being a cool exception from Gatecrash Limited, just because the format was so aggressive. But now that it's slowed down, we're really going to see the Madcap skills isn't nearly as good as it was in just Gatecrash only.
Right. Expect to see a lot less Madcap skills at the top table, a lot less 1-drops for, or 1-1s for 1 in general, 1-2s for 1, what have you. A lot more 7-drops.
Right. Agreed. Boros Elite, one of those cards that it actually breaks the mold. I think it's a 1-drop creature. Once you get Battalion, though, and you're able to start attacking, it does become a 3/3, which is very relevant in combat because there are so many 2/2s for 2 mana, able to break through that barrier.
Yeah, and actually, looking over Daniel Meyer's deck list here, it seems like he had a little problem with his creature count. He's only playing one of his 2 massive raids, I believe in favor of some creatures, so it makes cards like Ember Beast particularly awkward, and it seems like Daniel had a conflicting pool here.
Yeah, and that does happen a lot of times in sealed deck. You'll have the option to play like a lot of good creatures and not a lot of removal, or the opposite. And in particular in this format, I think it's much more important to have better creatures than it is to have better removal spells. There are some things that will just beat you if you don't have removal spells, such as Pack Rat, Vitu-Ghazi Guildmage, and a few others. But I think it's very important to make sure that you just start hitting your curve. Starting at maybe even 3, like you don't even necessarily need a 2-drop anymore, but just make sure that you're able to play either a threat or an answer over the course of the first, 5 or 6 turns of the game. If you're not able to match pace with your opponent, if you miss some land drops or something, it's going to get really bad for you quick. Missing color is particularly devastating.
It looks like this hand from Daniel Meyer only has a forest in it.
No, there is a Rakdos Guild Gate.
Okay,
Yeah, it's a new picture from the set. I actually messed that up a few times when I first drafted the set. I looked at it, I'm like, oh, it's a Blood Crypt. Oh wait, no, it's just a wait. They changed the pictures. I didn't even know they changed the pictures. Yeah. So that is a Rakdos Guild Gate. And I don't know what that card is.
Zerta Druid. I think it's the Druid.
No, that's a black-green card, I think.
Oh,
no, it is Zerta Druid. You're correct. For some reason, the picture looks very black.
It does,
so,
yeah.
But yeah, that's the Mana Accelerator that whenever you tap it for green mana, it does deal 1 damage to the opponent. And they both lead off with it from each side, both trying to ramp into 4 and 5 drops over the next few turns, or maybe just trying to play 2 spells in 1 turn to gain a slight advantage.
Right, and if I'm Daniel, I'm going to try and beat BBD down, because what Daniel chose to do, he chose to emphasize the lower end of his curve. He's not playing his Tenement Crasher, not playing his Minotaur Aggressor.
Yeah, I mean, and those are reasonable, exclusions, especially considering that neither of those cards were particularly good in their respective format.
Right.
However, now that I think the format has slowed down a lot, we have more mana accelerators in, the Zerta Druid. We have Keystones and or Cluestones, excuse me, and a few other things, as well as the Key Runes. I think that those 6 and 7 drops are actually good, especially since they have haste. They can just change a combat significantly. Minotaur Aggressor with First Strike being particularly hard to deal with in combat, needing a removal spell to deal with it.
Yeah, I've been surprisingly impressed with the Aggressor. He was okay in RTR Limited, unplayable when Gatecrash came out, but now he's finally come full circle. He's decent.
Yeah. All right, so it's funny, he keeps tapping in for mana, and I'm like, is he attacking? Yeah, like, obviously he's not attacking. So we see an Unleashed Dead Reveler, and what that's going to do is present a decent clock. However, Daniel is missing land drops, even though he is playing a Key Rune here. So.
Yep, so the 3/4 Dead Reveler faces down against the 2/3 Ivy League, and
Ivy League.
Yep.
Ivy Lane, yes. Sorry.
Ivy Lane, my bad.
I'm sure I'll mispronounce a few cards too, but no, yeah. So and then follow that up with Call the Conclave, which is going to trigger the Ivy Lane Denizen as long as Brian doesn't forget the trigger. Making it a 3/4 and allowing him to battle in for a bunch. I think he's waiting on a die here. There we go. All right. So he's making the Centaur 4/4, which can block the Dead Reveler, and yeah, he's got a pretty sweet board position, and following up with the Guild Gate, so not even missing the land drop.
Exactly. BBD's mana is awesome. He has quad red, double white, 2 green, so he's in great shape.
Yeah, considering his opponent is missing land drops. However, he did draw a land this turn on Daniel's side. It looks like BBD is pretty heavily favored unless Daniel has a series of plays. It's kind of funny to say that, oh, he has 5 mana sources, he's mana screwed, but You know, he did miss a land drop. He was spending a turn casting a mana accelerator instead of just playing a land. I think that's something important to note.
Yeah, for sure. Daniel is only going to be able to play either one big spell or 2 small spells in one turn, but from now on, BBD is going to be able to play 2 spells every turn if he wants to.
Yeah, as long as he has as long as he draws spells and not lands. So, all right, looks like we have.
Is that a Gaze of Granite? I think it is.
Gaze of Granite. Okay, so since it's a token, it has a converted mana cost of 0. So a Gaze of Granite on the Centaur token gets rid of it, allowing him to attack for 3 damage, putting Braun down to 16. And he decides to attack with the Zertod Druid. That's funny.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I would have gone for that play.
I mean, he could have just waited, maybe killed a few more things.
Yeah, because it seems like he's a little mana screwed. I would wait for BBD to empty his hand and then try and pull the trigger on the Gaze. But
that does seem strange. He could have, it's X or less. He may have thought it was X equals, because he could have done it for 1 more and killed his opponent's Zertod Druid, right? Oh, no, it hits his stuff, too.
Wow, Tristani Summoner for BBD, and Daniel Meyer must really be kicking himself now.
Let's get one of those Rhino tokens.
Wow. So Tristani Summoner, we'll get that one up on the screen for you. 7 for 1/1, but comes with 10
total power.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, basically just a mythic uncommon. This card is pretty unbelievable and limited, and we saw it in Constructed yesterday, and it was quite good in the games that we saw it. You know, since Daniel is stuck on 5 mana, it's going to be very hard for him to come back from this, I think. You know, the Gaze of the Granite, you know, could have taken care of BBD's mana accelerator, but it would have also killed Daniel's, slowing him down too much, so he wouldn't have been able to catch up. BBD eventually would have drawn a land anyway and been able to play Tristani Summoner. And if he had just waited, he would have been able to take care of all these tokens.
Yeah, you know, this format, it doesn't have much mass removal, so BBD probably wouldn't have played around it either. Daniel could have gotten a large advantage from this Gaze of Granite.
Yeah, he was very aggressive with his removal spell, and I think that's something that a lot of people in Limited do. They see a creature that's reasonably sized, and you know they want to attack for a few points of damage, so they blow the removal spell, killing that guy. But then they end up losing to a much better creature later in the game, and specifically with Gaze of Granite now, he's facing down 10, 11 power worth of creatures, and 3 green creatures came into play. Using Ivy Lane Denizen's triggers, but 3 counters spread around the board, so it was really 13 power for 7 mana, and I don't think he has another card to really deal with this.
No, he definitely doesn't. I've looked at his deck list, no Street Spasm, no Mortars like we were talking about. The Gaze of Granite was it, and now all he can do is stare at BBD's board and extend the hand.
Well, he can play some more spells.
He can. He's not long for this world, though, is he?
Resistance is futile.
Yeah, he could trade off his Key Rune for the Rhino, even if he has no good spells to play. The Druid can maybe jump in front of the other Druid, trade those off. But he's going to need quite a few creatures to come back from this one.
Yeah, and the Dead Reveler can't even block, so it looks like there's not really a series of plays he could have here to get out of it. He's got I think he has a Traitorous +2/+0 card in his hand. I don't know.
Yeah, Traitorous Instinct, that'll be able to steal the Rhino for a few points of trampled, but BBD is at a healthy 14 right now.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what that card is. Maybe it's Tenement Crasher?
I don't know, you might have sided the Crasher in. It would be a good board in versus BBD.
Yeah, you just want, bigger creatures, but I don't think it's going to help him here. Alright, so while we're waiting for Daniel to make a decision, we're going to talk a little bit about Grand Prix Miami.
Oh yeah, it's coming up pretty soon.
Grand Prix Miami taking place. StarCityGames.com is running the event, and we have some cool stuff going on for you. To start with, I would like to talk about the Grand Prix Miami commemorative tokens. Now, this is the second token series from Star City Games featuring some of its, I'm not going to say better authors because I'm on the list, but it says right here on this paper, it says premium authors, so we're going to go with premium authors.
Premium means better, doesn't it?
Yeah, sure. So anyone who comes to the tournament, if you sign up for the Grand Prix, you get a free set of all 5 of the tokens, and on Friday night from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. there is a meet and greet with all of the people on the tokens. This includes myself, Todd Anderson, Cedric Phillips, Reed Duke, Tom Martell, and Sam Black, and I believe those are the 5, and we should all be there for that. But yeah, cutting back to the game, looks like
I believe that was a Blood Rush Rubble Belt mecha to take care of the Centaur token.
sure. And so BBD opting to block with his 4/4 against the Dead Reveler, losing it to the Rubble Belt Maka, and then you know, followed up Golgari Longlegs.
Not too bad, not too bad.
Not bad.
So Daniel Meyer effectively plays 2 spells in 1 turn,
Ooh.
but wow.
Yeah, and then exiles the Longlegs, making another Rhino.
Not so bad.
Not bad at all.
We'll get the hand from Daniel Meyer.
That's true. All right, well, that was the